Welcome, everybody, to part 3 of Pagan Power. And today we're going to talk about how power works. Now, as you know, I'll go over the last two parts really quick. That we know that all personal power begins simply the moment the brain sparks and you begin breathing. That is as personal power as you get, and you keep that power as long as you continue breathing. The minute that you stop breathing, you know that that is the end of your game, your life, your situation, unless they can bring you back to breathing. And that is your personal power. And breath represents a lot of things, how you breathe, how you act, and it's why it's so important to so many of the religious, spiritual, and other practices in the military. Everywhere they teach you about your breath. If you have no breath, then you do not have life as we know it as a human being. So then you go on to that. That sparks enough chemical energy to get you the food, the water, and all the things that you need. And as we know, we talk about clean air, clean water, the food that and the water that you drink, clean earth, the stuff around you, and clean fire, the energy that you possess. And that makes for a clear spirit. That is a very pagan personal power path. The second thing we've learned in why power is that all power comes from force, resources, and knowledge. Force can be violence, which is the primary form of power in the world. It becomes that is where almost all power originates in our world is through violence. The second way is through force or labor. You can use your labor to make it. You can do things. Resources, monetization, having the resources, the land, the ownership. My volume's dropping. Okay. Um, and that happens. To be what you did, the land you own, the land you control. And at one time, land ownership was not considered personal. It was considered, a group, but that was how you shared in that land, how you share the resources is a very, very important part of it. The second way that is a very important part is that with resources, you can buy labor and you can buy violence. So that makes it even better. And then knowledge. Knowledge is the most difficult one because it can be shared, it can be fungible, secret, but that is where a lot of power arises. And in pagan world, that's where it mostly arises. In the world, it can also get you resources. The number one way pagans in this world seem to have their power is by sharing their knowledge and by creating various types of gateways in order to be monetized, to be resourced, to be ego driven. It doesn't matter what it is, but it appears to be that knowledge has always been what has been crucial to the pagan world, and that is where it is uh, today. So now we go back and we now look at that knowledge. Knowledge can make it easier to make resources. Sure, if you know how to turn uh, things into other things, such as iron ore into iron, you can make swords, and then you can have swords to make violence, and then you use the violence to conquer empires. So we see that this is the way that the world works in power, and anyone makes excuses otherwise doesn't really understand what the world works under. Today, we're going to go about how to power. And the first thing you have to understand is that you have to have something in you that wants to do something. This is very important. I know lots of lazy people who sit around all day doing the bare amount of job, watching television, watching their things about, and then they complain about their lives. And then they'll complain about the junkie. Let me tell you, there is nothing lazy about a junkie, a drug junkie, a heroin junkie, a methadone junkie, a meth addict. There's nothing lazy about them because they have something they gave their power to, the drug, to make them feel better, to change the way they feel inside, or just to answer the pain inside of them. And the minute that drug is not available to them, they figure out ways to get it. They change the way they think. They change the way that they work. They go out and get whatever they need in order to satisfy that consumption. Now, I mention that, people go, oh, yeah, but that's just drugs. That's true of everything. We feel better once we get the things that gives us the things that makes us feel a change of side. And that usually is status. That is energy. that is where we are in the world today. And that's where I'm going to start Pagan Power. Pagan Power begins in understanding that our words are the key point of where we say our power is. What do I mean? How we visualize in the world and how we filter it through our paradigms, through our minds, is extremely important. And since we do not use violence as a general rule, there's not a violent pagan administration right now that I know of physically, then, and we don't tend to have as much money. I mean, hate to say it, the Joel Osteen's Mega Christian Church is far more powerful than I think almost the entirety of the pagan community. In a lot of ways, they can do things. And that is, they have plenty of money coming from their members, and they've got plenty of ways to trade status for that. You want a better seat, buy it. If you want, to see Joel, buy it. And then they take that money and build these ostentatious cathedrals, which we've always done. We love big, gaudy spaces, what makes us feel so small and makes us feel like we're part of something larger. And these are the things we tend to reject in the pagan community. We don't care so much about cathedrals. We love to go to them, but we don't love them to a point we want to build them. What do we want to build? Well, everybody has an individual answer, but the primary answer has been freedom, or what you see as freedom. Freedom of action, freedom of thought, freedom to do as you please. When it was illegal, marijuana was one of the more common denominators in pagan practices. It was a place where you could find others who not only smoke marijuana and take it in other forms, but also then be willing to share it. And it wasn't because, this was some sort of drug dealing system, though there was some power in that. It was because we wanted freedom to explore our minds. Psilocybins, drugs, such as mushrooms, psilocybins, LSD, all of that were ways for people to break free their minds from what was the paradigm of the time. The very Ronald Reagan paradigm, the very anti-drug time. And these are post-World War II Christian phenomena. We didn't have as much of that prior. I mean, LSD was not even illegal, wasn't even created. Mushrooms were not illegal until such times as when they wanted to have a stronger control. Governmental systems and consumer systems want more control over our individual actions. Remember, whenever tyranny comes in, they want to cut your ability to gain new information. That's where pagan power comes in. At most times, we discover that pagan power is telling us things we did not know, things that we could do with our bodies, could do with our minds, and most importantly, do with our voices. And in order to protect that, in the early days, the days of Gardnerianism and Alexandrianism, and less of the internet and book timing, people will complain, you can get books all the time. Today, a book is coming out every single day by somebody in our community. Some are good, some are great, some are amazing, some are AI drivel. But before, you had no way of telling because you belonged to a group. And once you belonged to a group, you took a secrecy oath. And in part because of the need to not be discriminatory too. And people change that idea that you don't talk about the people involved. You're talking about the sciences. They're talking about the arts, talking about the crafts, talking about how we change our lives with this philosophy of clean elements. I like that. It said in the bottom part, it says of clean elements, and that we can do that. But what they would do is that they would say that you can't talk about anything we do in this. You can't talk about what we're teaching you. You can't talk about any of it. And that was a way to gatekeep knowledge and keep it away from others so that you would return to the status teacher, to the teacher, and that they would be able to control what you're learning so they can teach you your system. There was once a time when we used to call a Llewellyn book, Llewellyn book person who read Llewellyn books is a Llewellyn witch because they couldn't possibly learn how to be a witch from just books. And there's a certain truth to that. You can read all the books you want on how to cook, but until you do cook, you don't know how. You can read a book on how to do push-ups, but until you do push-ups, it doesn't do you much good. And people who do that are called coaches. No, just kidding. There are people who do study things so that they can explain it to people, but mostly, in order to control knowledge, you're able to keep people from making other choices simply because they don't know it existed. In the 90s, we saw this battle itself out. It was a major cause of witch wars. It was a major cause of witch wars. It was that person isn't teaching you the right way. They don't have the right lineage. They don't have the energy to teach you what I can teach you. There was very little cooperation. The only place you saw a lot of this cooperation is probably the place where I think pagans have earned the most amount of pardon. Two, and that is festivals. Festivals is the playground of power in our community. The ability to afford it, the ability to own the land or rent the land, the ability to organize the events, and being able to be invited to do classes, to be invited to be part of the higher order. And eventually, if you are a good enough writer, and if you're a good enough speaker, and if you're interesting enough, you'll be asked to speak. But you won't be paid. You might be given a slot. And that's where most of the authors are. Most of the writers are, most speakers are. For power. I do that. I mean, I get that. But I also turn down a lot. But then, once you get attention, once you are winning the game, when people really want to listen to you, when you're really good at it, they're willing to pay you to attend because you can sell more tickets being on the bill than they normally can sell. So, what is the source of power in the pagan community? Grabbing attention, holding attention, and then allowing it to be monetized. So knowledge, technology, that's interesting. Knowledge is that source of power. We all know that. But what has happened to knowledge now? Now it's become very fungible. You have radio shows. When I began, one of the ways I gained early authority is I was not a writer. I just wasn't. As much as I'd love to be, I just didn't have the discipline. Number one problem, discipline. I didn't have the capacity to be edited. Something I'm still learning how to do. And that was because I just felt very comfortable, felt my lack of knowledge, my lack of understanding how the writing process worked stood against me for that. But I wanted to be a functional leader. So what did I do? I discovered to build platforms. And the very first platform I actually really built was an office called Psychic Services, where I rented spaces to psychics who didn't have offices. And this is right before the phone services. The phone services, the 800, the 900 lines would wipe out this business because everybody discovered they can do it from the house. But prior to that, nobody could give a reading from the phone. Oh no, that was terrible. We couldn't do that. We weren't allowed to do that. And so now we can. We discovered we could. And that kind of, yeah, but I was building a platform where people could rent the space for an hour or two. Yes. That was in 1992, 93. And one of the ways we learned to advertise was through radio. And I was trying to buy advertisement on the radio. And they told me my ads just wouldn't work. Scott Smentek, captain of the festival. But he said, you could rent, broker radio time in which you could have your own show. And I thought that was kind of cool. So I became one of the very first commercial shows for pagans and for psychics out there. And that is how I gained my original initial authority in the community, not by my own writings, but by presenting to my audience interesting people who they would listen to every week that they didn't know or would know or eventually do know, and they wanted to ask questions of. So I learned to gain my initial authority and status in the community by providing platforms to the community to express themselves. I still do that to this day. I build platforms to help people. That's where my authority comes in. And because of that, I'm able to help people, build on people, and also earn an income by various methods. So knowledge is extremely important, and how you see yourself within that status. Today, within the pagan world, if you're not an author, are you really a leader? And that's been an argument for a very long time. It's changed now. So today, right now, I'm going to give you 3 ways to use pagan power for yourself and for others in a way that makes sense. The first thing you need to understand is that you need to have a North Star, not necessarily a goal, but a basic direction that you want to move your life. And so that is it. So I've always taught, and people have been very successful. I've led thousands of people now to become clergy and status because I've given them the ability to have a North Star. How do you become a first degree? How do you become a second degree? How do you become a third degree? And I didn't do it by teaching them individually. I taught them they could do it, they can learn, and then they could teach each other. In essence, my North Star was how to get people to acknowledge they were Wiccan, pagan, enough to be able to form some sort of coherency and build the ways to do so. So by getting people to find ways to build their own lives, their own practices, their own ability to lead through platforms that taught these ideas, and then introduce them to each other so that they could form bonds between them, they were able to succeed. And what are bonds? Bonds are what I feel attached to. It is bonds, what are we, how we feel with each other. Combine it with the idea of status, meaning I'm a first degree, I know this, and I can teach somebody who's not a first degree. Second degree, I'm not a second degree. Now I'm a second degree. I can teach first degrees. I'm now a third degree. I can lead a temple. And I can lead a temple, and I can create second and first degrees. Now I'm an archpriest in charge of my tradition, or I'm a higher level in my own tradition. Now I'm in charge of several temples. I've built my status. I should know things, and my knowledge is rarefied. And then finally, I've not only have helped first priests within the Corellian tradition, but I've helped create more priests and archpriests in other traditions as well by being a good coach and showing them how to organize their actions. So what is your North Star? That's it. What is your North Star? What is it that you say, if I'm not moving in that direction, I'm not moving the right way? Recently, in the last year, I've come to a little more than a year, I came to the focus myself that I was not moving in the right way that I wanted to, because I want to help a long-term community form. And just being a teacher and a writer and a platform builder wasn't enough. So I had to find what was deeper, what was farther than the North Star that I was finding. And I want to play in the game of land. I want to play in the game of permanency. I want to create time capsules for people so that they can learn about it. I want to remember what remembers lives. And that requires a different set of talents. And that required me to surrender platforms, to surrender things. And guess what I got out of that? tons of great people, leaders, amazing leaders, amazing teachers, amazing practitioners who filled in most of what I wanted and most of what I did. And then they turned it into their own, and they are turning it into their own so that it will last. Creating something that's permanent, you might as well build a sculpture. If you want something permanent, build a sculpture. But if you want something that is going to continue, it has to be adaptive. So that's the first thing. The second thing all pagans should know about their power is the use of language. Pagans study spells. Pagans know magic. They know their spells make a difference, even to the point of things like neurolinguistic programming. What is that? It is the ability to use words that trigger people, or to get people to act in a certain way, or get them to understand something in a certain way. And they may not even realize it's happening. In fact, we use it all the time. Today, we live in a world of propaganda. We learn in a world of paradigms and images, and we're so flooded with them that we must find a way to work with them so that we can succeed. Good example is when somebody says, "Oh, thank you for letting me do it. Let me do it. A favor for you." Well, thank you for doing that for me. You don't answer with, "Oh, you're welcome." You answer with, "My pleasure." If you are looking out and saying, "Do you need Does somebody need assistance?" It says, "How can I be of assistance?" Not, "Do you need help?" See, these are empowering terms. So when you look at your language and look at how you deal with it, then you're able to motivate and be able to have people look at you in a different way and to trust you. Trust is the most key thing that you have. Today, I feel very trusted by those people who know me. And because I'm trusted, I'm more than willing to do things. And I'm not worried about what people say about me. I don't care about my reputation. That's not an important part of me. Now, it's an essential part of what happens. If you don't have a good reputation, then you have a more difficult time. But it's not possible. Nothing is impossible. We know that now for me, because my North Star, which finally ended, was the idea of being part of the Parliament of World Religions. I went from a place where I was hurt and I was damaged and I was mentally ego-driven, where at the same time I was seen as a national leader and at the same time as completely insignificant. That was the 1993 Parliament of World Religions. At the time, I was told that we didn't even belong there. We were told, we were there by privilege, that we were there not because we didn't have the numbers, we didn't have the impact, we didn't have a lot of things, but most importantly, we didn't have enough numbers to prove that we were a significant change. And most of my life, I have spent looking at building Pagan Power through our numbers, through our communication. And that is essentially what we've done. So what did I do? We went out, we started doing study groups, find more people. We started doing magazines. We did all sorts of magazines. We did radio. We would do interviews. People don't remember, there was a time being in the press, getting a news article was a big thing. It was difficult. It was hard. And it was something that I was able to do over 400 times in a little more than a decade for myself and or my others. Oftentimes, there are a lot of news articles that never mention my name that I was directly involved with. And yeah, Byron says, I remember those days well. And it was hard. I sent out, and people asked, well, how did you finally do it? How'd you get Witchcool out there? And I said, I did press releases. People don't remember, I did over 50 press releases that was related to us. And those got us news stories, all sorts of news stories, front page of Chicago Tribune, Sun Times, USA Today. AOL. Yeah, at one time being on the front page of AOL was a big deal. And probably the most popular single article I ever wrote, the one that has had the greatest impact, it was Pagans and Christians Agree Wicca to be the third largest religion in America. And it was filled with all sorts of weird facts. It was the first mentioning about doubling, that our numbers were doubling constantly. And it was about the idea that we'd have to build schools. We'd have to build all of this. This was in 2003, I believe. And today it's been quoted over 50,000 times, and people still believe it. It is not a true article, but it's not a false one either. But it was a manipulation of cotton candy facts and statistics. And people believed it, and they still believe it today. They're thinking that Wicca and paganism are the fastest growing religions in America, which is patently untrue. It is actually Muslims who have grown more so in both numbers and size, though not statistically, and evangelical Christian groups. They have dramatically increased their numbers. They have increased their numbers in the same period of time at a higher level than pagans ever have. And we have no cohesion. But why did people believe it? Because it felt good. It felt like they were brought to something that was moving as a wave. They brought it because they thought it was important. So when you find your North Star and you know what you want to get, you have to move with momentum. Momentum means to keep moving from not just the energy you're applying, which makes it faster, but continues on even if you're not pushing anymore. That it has a certain amount of energy until it's stopped. Paganism has momentum. And that momentum comes from their words, and their words come from where people are. People want to believe you. They want to help you. They want to be part of it. Because if they're part of it, it means they will receive some benefit. Why do we need readings? Why is tarot readings, psychic readings so important? Because ultimately, they frame a world or thoughts for an individual who may not be capable at that time of organizing their own thoughts. And they're confused, they're hurt, they are needing to be listened to, they need to be felt and seen. And tarot readings and other forms of psychic gifts give that individual who's paying monetized, which is important, that you have money, that you, as the reader, are recognizing them. Very few readings I've ever done have been for individuals who really need an answer that was significant. And for them, I've taken them and guided them through the process of tarot readings and such, so they found their own place. To make a decision. So, as a leader, your words, if you want power, has always got to be towards what is the goals, what is the purpose, but most importantly, what is your status within it? Lose that, and a man cannot function. Women can, way better than men. I will say that. But even they have a difficult time if they don't know where their status in the community is. They will fight for one. And this is what the friction entirely in our community is for this concept of status. Where do we stand against each other? Now let's get into the last piece. If you want real power in the world, this is not pagan power. This is authority. You must accept that there is a legal system that you have to work with or compete with in a way that you can bring energy and resources, if necessary, through labor, violence if necessary, Any street king will tell you that. And it will be also important that they are able to improve their lives through resources, meaning they have a better house, or they can go to the festival, or they can go buy a tent, or they can go out, have a drink, or they can go out and get medical help. They can buy knowledge. They can buy crystals. All of that's important. If you can bring them closer to that and find out reasons for it, then you're there. The third part of this is that you need to be able to protect them. This is the number one thing that I have spent my life within the Karelian tradition and within other traditions. People don't realize that I've done a lot of different things for different traditions, and I've advised them on their paperwork. Everybody will argue, oh, we're not a church. We don't want that model. Okay, then fine. Are you willing to go get yourself elected to office? Are you willing to get that law changed? I do want to, but I do need that protection so that I will then establish what I'm doing and phrase it in a way that is legal so that I can have all of the legal and moral rights set to it. And that for me was in the Karelian tradition, we became a legal church. That's right. Everyone can do it. 3 people can put a legal church. And there's a fear out there amongst the religious right now through dominionist think tanks, is that if we were to, in the United States, form 10,000 churches and with 3 to 5 people as allowed, and in our bylaws, we started putting our rights as our religious convictions. That a woman has a right to self-sovereignty of her body, that a man has the right to self-sovereignty of her body, and no one else's. And that we can do so. And I will answer that question, Byron. That's a good point. And I will answer, and so that no one else will. If we do not have a legal status, and from a point of view, and we're trying to ask for legal rights, we're going to have a much more difficult time proving that our ideas are our hard-held beliefs. So a legal document such as a church charter allows for that and allows for us to do a lot more things. Now, Byron just mentioned, and Mary Calavante agreed with her, is that pagans think of church or these church structures as restrictive, as deeply restrictive, and they don't let you do things. No, but if you want to build any scale, you need them. You can use them to avoid taxes. Not avoid taxes, you're just not taxed. You're allowed to do things. So if you're buying food for a food pantry and you're a church, especially with a 501c3, which is not recognition of a church, but a recognition of your right to do good deeds under the law. That's right. It's really just a good deed thing. And that it doesn't actually make you a church. It just makes you how you report your income and the money that you're earning and all of that to the IRS as necessary with a lot less paperwork than if you were. So if you were to say donate to a food pantry from your own pocket, you're paying sales tax on the food. You're doing all this thing, and it doesn't have any value to you personally other than how you feel inside. You need to get a letter from a church or the food pantry that has a 501c3, and you can then use it to take off your taxes. If you donate that money directly to a food pantry that has a 501c3, they can actually use it in a way you can't. First, they can buy food they need without sales tax. The second thing they can do is that they can also then go to people who are selling the food or and buying it at a reduced cost because they can buy it in larger bulk, and because they're a charity, a lot of times they will get favorable terms. Now, this is all parasiting off the idea that most churches are Christian, some are Muslim, some are Jewish. it doesn't really apply a lot of times to pagan churches because we don't want to recognize ourselves as being in the paradigm of an organized religion. So that's a really hard piece of power that you can have that also screws with the common pagan mind. Because what do they really want? Well, they do want status and protection, but they want freedom from trauma, freedom from pain, freedom from all the rules around them. They think that paganism is a free pass, uh, that gives them permission to act behaviorally by behavior not authorized by common society. So let me go back to the origins of paganism and tell you the number one power by far that actually made the festivals work and still does. It's sex. 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 The ability to have sex without guilt, without limits, without restriction was very, very attractive to a very, very pent up society. Still is. We still have polyamory because of that. People want to practice different types of love. And so this idea of, and I'm talking sex, I'm not talking necessarily about love, though it goes hand in hand. But without that sexual component, especially for the younger ones early on, they were hedonists. Oh my God. You talk to any of them, I've talked to all of them. This was very attractive. And people would come to festivals. They would come out of the way to avoid the eyes of society in order to practice free love. Now that's changing a bit, but you see it in the depth about accepting any form of sexuality that you want to claim. Short of pedophilia, and there's parts of the community even there that's been it's been a big argument about late teenage sex. That's still a big argument because some people think it's okay, and there's other people who it's not okay. But beyond that, the idea that you want to sleep with women, men, if you want to be transitional, intersex, any number of things within our community, that's still very acceptable, very attractive. And that is a lot of power too. And then finding people who will accept your status is crucial. So then you want to find things. For me, this is the last piece. And then we'll open it up for questions. The real power of paganism right now is simply dealing with trauma. Paganism, in all its different forms, has this tremendous power to heal trauma for so many people. And when they do, they bond with people and they want to become part of a community that wants to be better. We see it all the time now. Globally, I've seen it. I can tell you the 4,000, 5,000 people I've led to help becoming clergy. I can tell you the hundreds of thousands I've introduced to witchcraft. I can tell you all of that. And at the core of it, they want to feel accepted. They want to feel part of something. And that's why we get into the types of fights we do. Because we are dealing with our reputation, our emotions, and how we attach them to other people. We don't see ourselves necessarily as individuals. Even though they say, oh, we're all individuals, our own priests, our own priestess. Ultimately, we want to have that against a series of other people as a status. We want to say, I follow this person. I want to say I belong to this system because it gives us energy, it gives us focus, and it gives us protection. It is why when we fight, we use reputational violence, reputational combat. We try to destroy the reputation of those around us. We don't want to have energy to combat it. We want to destroy it so that we don't have to change our behavior. We can do whatever we want. Because if somebody else does something and you don't, you can't say it can't be done. You say that person shouldn't be doing it. There's only two ways to build the highest, tallest buildings in the world. One is that you build the tallest building in the world. And that's what I'm all about. My next steps is going to be about building energies and building my resources and building my power in order to build land, to build clean earth, to go back to something I find very pure in my heart, very North Star. And so I want to build taller buildings. The second way is to destroy the tallest buildings, to take them down. It's called the tall poppy syndrome. Any poppy that stands up above the thing gets its head chopped off because you want everything even. Because if you want equality, can you have exemplary people? And that's hard. So what we need to learn is how to deal with equity. Not power over, but power with. So how do you build power with others? Share your ideas. Let people work within them. Let them know that they're going to get the credit or status that they're going to need. And then allow them to build on from that. It's what the community has done for 50 years. So my last thought, and then we'll open it up for questions, is this. People ask me, how was I capable of doing a lot of the things that I've done that have actually moved the world? I have changed laws. I have built the largest Wiccan tradition. The largest Wiccan tradition. Yeah, maybe Wiccan. I've gone off and I've gotten news stories. I've gotten all of this because I personally did not need to take credit, but responsibility. That's right. If you're willing to take responsibility and not worry about the credit, you can do anything you want. When you get to the credit, you got to be very careful. That is where status and anger and all that comes in. So with that, I will close this up saying that the way you get personal power is by breathing and then using that breathing to use your voice. Second thing is use what you have, either it be force, labor, resources, or knowledge to find your niche, to find your North Star to what you're doing, right? And then work on them. And you build your power. There's other ways to build power. That is how you build power in the pagan community. And if you can survive, because you see it's a game of survival, no question, then you can make an impact into the future. Anyone who makes a difference today makes an impact on the future. Think about it this way. If a time traveler can come back in time and does a small thing to change that time, why can't we do the same thing except in our present? What if we can change a small thing that'll make a huge impact into the future? I saw 2 books Byron mentioned. This is that. So if you have any questions, feel free. I think Blade in the Chalice was one of them by Eisler. And I saw Starhawk. I can't see what it was. Let me see if I can see it. Starhawk's Webs of Power too. I've never read that. And Rain Eisler's Chalice of the Blade with the primary source. I'm reading that one. It's pretty eye-opening, and I'm learning about it. So we're open for any questions that you want on air. And I thank you all for attending and see the other parts. And we will now